Hey, it's Chelsea. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for tuning in and being a part of the Quiet Connection community. Did you know that you can support me and gain exclusive perks by subscribing to my Patreon account? By becoming a subscriber, you'll get access to bonus episodes, ad-free listening, exclusive chats, and even monthly goodies in the mail handmade by me. Your support helps me continue creating high-quality content and ensures that we keep spreading awareness and ending the stigma surrounding perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and so much more. Head on over to Patreon, search Quiet Connection Podcast, and join the community of listeners who are helping me make this podcast the best it can be. Hi, welcome to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma around postpartum mental health. I'm Chelsea. This week, author Vickie Rubin shares her journey into motherhood and the challenges she faced raising a child with a disability. She opens up about the emotional impact of receiving a diagnosis for her child and the anxiety she experienced as a parent along the way. She also highlights the importance of a strong support system and the transformative power of acceptance and advocacy. Here's Vickie. Hello. Today I'm here with Vickie. Vickie, how are you?
Good. How are you? And thank you for having me.
I'm good. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to have you on today. I'm going to jump right into it. I would love it if you could tell me a little bit about who you are and who you were before you became a mom.
That's a great starting question. So right now, I am a self-described mom of 3, nana of 3, author, wife, I should have wife, author, and an advocate for individuals and families of individuals who have disabilities, typically intellectual disabilities. So who I was before was a college student who graduated from the University of Miami, and I got my degree in elementary education, had no desire to work in special education because I didn't think I would have the patience. Karma. my daughter taught me a lot about patience, and I eventually got my master's in special education. But who I was before, my priorities were very different. I don't want to use the word shallow, but I was 24 before I had kids, and I wasn't really thinking about big picture and life.
Yeah.
It was more like in the present, what's going on.
Totally. That's what you do when you're in your early 20s.
Right. And all that changed. All that changed after children.
What sort of things brought you joy prior to having kids? Like, what were some of the things that if it was like a Friday night and you had no plans and you were going to do something, what were you going to do?
So what was fun then was, I met my husband at 18. So it was usually going out with him, going out to eat, certainly having more than one drink, and maybe going and hearing a band or dancing. And, those days you would take a nap before you went out. Yeah. So, you could stay out really late. Now you go home before 9:00. Yeah. But I always looked forward to the weekends. That was something I really, really looked forward to. I didn't have a set career before I had children, so I wasn't really focused on work then. Mm-hmm.
Just having fun, living life.
Having fun. I remember my big thing, because I moved here. We started in Long Island, went to the University of Miami, and then my husband schlepped me to Western New York, and I didn't really know anybody. And I remember every day I would decide, what am I going to cook today? So during the week when we were home, I would try to make these elaborate dinners, and that was really fun for me, because at that point I didn't really have any friends, and I didn't really know what to do here. It was
Yeah.
very different than the other places that I had lived.
Yeah, and I'm sure that will play a part in your story too. But so that's great. That's a great way to bring us to what was that journey into parenthood like for you when you and your partner, you and your husband decided, guess it's time for kids? Or is that what happened?
I was just thinking about this the other night. I was thinking it was probably New Year's Eve 1981. And I remember, no, it had to be 1980. And I remember the two of us said, this is the year we're going to have a baby. And I did. I got pregnant. I got pregnant in 1981. Our daughter Jessica was born in 1982. And it wasn't a struggle to have a child. Her birth experience was a whole other story,
Yeah.
but
The getting pregnant part just
the
happened.
getting pregnant part for me, that was really easy.
Yeah.
It just kind of happened. And I remember every morning waking up and saying to myself, I'm pregnant. Like, I loved being pregnant. I
Yeah.
know a lot of people, including family members, who really don't like that experience, but I was excited about being pregnant. I just loved. But during my pregnancy, at the end of my pregnancy, I started to have some issues, which made it a little more difficult. But in general, most of the 9 months, I was like, yes, this is fun. And how is it going to be? And it was 1982. They weren't doing all the different testing, and
Yeah.
you didn't have, you got pregnant and you had a baby. It wasn't like it is now with all the testing. And with my other two children, I certainly had more testing.
Yeah. So take us through that journey. Your pregnancy was you kind of got to live in the pregnancy bubble for a while. And then we come to babies due, babies on the way. Take us through that experience.
So about a week before I was due, I had a rash.
Mm,
And I kept calling my doctor, who said, baby is settling. All right.
whatever that
I even went to
means.
I went to the pharmacist. Like, can you look at my rash? I think they gave me calamine.
Mm.
Okay. So I go into labor, and I get to the first hospital, and throughout the beginning of my experience, I was talking about this rash, and I was kind of being blown off until one nurse looked at it and said, you know, that looks like chicken pox to me.
Mm.
And so I'm going to preface it with, it was Easter Sunday.
Oh
so,
man.
so it was Easter Sunday. There weren't a whole lot of regulars there.
Yeah.
And the doctor had to do a biopsy of one of my pocks. And I have such a clear vision. I was going through labor, and he was cutting the
Oh.
pocks. And I remember not really feeling that as much, because I was going through a labor pain. And then they came back and they said, yeah, you have chicken pox. This hospital was unable to deal with that. My husband was told by a resident, it's very likely we could lose your wife and your child. You're going to have to move to Children's Hospital. There was a special serum that they were going to give to our baby. I didn't know what our baby was at the time, to
Yeah.
give to our baby. And it was, as I said, Easter Sunday. And my father in law had to drive. I mean, this all sounds like a movie. My
Yeah.
father in law had to drive to the cancer hospital, which had this serum, and it closed at 2 o'clock, the pharmacy. And so he had to drive. I mean, it wasn't even done like officially.
Oh
It's
my
like, what if he dropped the
gosh.
serum, whatever? I don't
Yeah.
know. And I wasn't taken by ambulance to Children's Hospital. My husband drove me. So he drove me to Children's Hospital. My father-in-law got the serum. Once I got into Children's Hospital of Buffalo, they were like, "We can deal with this."
Okay.
It was so calming. They put me in isolation. I wasn't allowed to see anybody, and it was everyone knows what it feels like now post-COVID, but
Yeah.
but it was kind of like that at that time. We got the serum in time and it was given to Jessica. She was put in the NICU, a neonatal intensive care unit. She was small for birth. So she was 4 pounds, probably 11 ounces when she was born. So they did put her in the NICU and I couldn't see her.
Mm.
So back in the day, in 1982, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have texting or, instant photos. So my husband went out and bought a Polaroid camera and he
Aw.
would take little pictures. I have pictures of it in my book. He took little pictures of her in the isolette and, would bring them back up to me.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I was better and I had to leave the hospital without my daughter
Mm.
because I needed to get approval from a doctor that I no longer had chicken pox before they allowed me to bring her home.
Mhm.
So I went to a pediatrician who basically said, "Nope, you do not have chicken pox anymore." And we were able to bring her home. It was probably a week after I delivered her, but going home without my baby in my arms and still all that the hormones and the new mom,
Yeah.
I was pumping to make
Okay.
sure that I still was able to be able to breastfeed when I got home. And so she came home. She was When she came home, she was 4.5 pounds,
So
and
she was still losing some weight.
she still lost weight, but everything else about her was fine at the time. So they allowed her to leave the hospital, even though it's very unusual for a baby under 5 pounds to leave the hospital. She was teeny tiny.
Yeah.
So it was quite the entrance into the world
I'd
and into
say.
motherhood.
Yeah.
And she didn't get chicken pox. She got it later on when she was a teenager. She never got chicken pox.
Wow.
And I remember saying to myself, chicken pox? I mean, didn't I already have all these childhood diseases? Like,
Yeah.
why am I getting chicken pox as a delivering mom? But
Yeah, that's so
yeah,
random, so close
it's
to.
so random.
Oh my gosh. So those Polaroids obviously were a big deal for you. What other things helped you get through that first week without being able to see her or hold her or touch her?
I had a lot of I had support from family. I
Okay.
knew I was going to see her. So, in my career, I worked with families who who really had stories where they were unable to see their child and their child was not going to come home in a week. I mean, I didn't have that information then. There was like
Mhm.
how hard it could have been. But I did know that I was going to be able to see her within the week, and my husband was visiting her back and forth, and so I was just at that point able to deal with it, and everyone kept saying, "Take the time to sleep at night because you're
Yeah.
not going to be able to. Take this time to rest and take care of yourself." So I did the best I could. I was okay. I was okay because I knew in a day or two, after I was going to see her.
Yeah, so you had that hope to hold on to, which was good.
I did. I did have hope to hold on to.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. You had a good support system too.
I had a good support system. My parents uh, were not for the grandchildren were not like hands on. My mom didn't come and she came and said hi, but she paid for me to have a baby nurse. And so
Oh.
so she knew that it wasn't going to be something that she could do, but she wanted me to
Mhm.
have a nurse, which was pretty remarkable because first of all, this nurse had 30 years experience and in all her experience she
Mm.
never had a baby as small as Jessica. So that was
Wow.
that it was new to her also, and she basically taught me how to care. I mean, I don't know how people do this. They bring home a baby and it's what?
Yeah.
It's really hard. But a lot of people have a sibling, a parent, or somebody come. I did that for my daughter-in-law and my daughter. I came and
Hmm.
and was hands on because you don't you think you have this knowledge, but when the baby's actually there, it is a whole different story, and it's
Hmm.
really hard.
It's so cool to hear you talk about that though, that your mom did that for you, because I had a guest in season 2 who started a concierge postpartum nursing business, and it's like the only one of its
Wow.
kind right now. Right.
Wow.
So like this, you're talking about in the 80s, your mom found this nurse for you, and you're talking about how important that was to you. And our guest, Donica from season 2, is trying to make that mainstream. And so it's so good to hear you say, like, that was so helpful. That was so helpful.
So where I grew up, as I keep saying, Long Island. My mom had a baby nurse. It was something that was done.
It was just something you guys
It's
did.
something we did. But moving to Western New York, when I started looking for a nurse, I was getting, well, what is your disability? Why do you need a nurse? Like
Yeah.
no one. It was so hard. And then through networking, I eventually found someone who was experienced, but that was not easy. That was especially in the 80s, and people here kind of looked at like, why do you need a nurse?
Yeah, it's not a
it,
norm everywhere.
it is not a norm, but it's extremely helpful. I with my daughter, when she was in Ohio, we had somebody also come, a doula, and she was doing it after, and she came at in the
Mhm.
evening for 2 nights so that we could get some sleep, which
Yeah, I'm learning so much more about postpartum doulas, and I said I just there's so much that I would change about the healthcare system, especially the like maternity and postpartum and whatever, but like doulas need to be a thing, and they need to be covered by insurance,
absolutely.
and home nursing needs to be a thing and needs to be covered by insurance, and this is proof of that. So,
You have
yeah.
surgery, and VNA, Visiting Nurses Association, comes to the house. They teach you what you need to know. They look at your wounds, they care for
Mhm.
you. And then you have a baby and you come home and they're
And
like,
they're like,
"Hey, have a good
"See ya."
life." Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
just
You'll
you'll
figure it
figure
out.
it out. Everyone else has, but it's tough, and not everyone figures it out right away, and it could really change it could change that whole postpartum time if you
Yeah.
had different support for many people who
It's true, and your postpartum journey with your first was unique. I mean, and you were saying like at first she was little, but she was okay. How did that evolve?
so I was talking to you before. I felt like I had more of postpartum confusion, and
Mhm.
um, I would bring my daughter to the pediatrician every month and say, something's not right. I just, she's not doing her milestones. You read about all the different milestones. At that point, you can't go online, but you have all the books.
You've got the
You have the
books.
books. And at one point, he said to me, "She's fine. You probably need some psychiatric counseling." And so my thought was,
Mm.
well, maybe I need some counseling, but that does not mean she's fine. And
Yeah.
I wish I had the strength and the wisdom that I have now then. And it was so confusing for me because after I would have a visit with him, I'd come home and I would be pumped. Yeah, she's fine. I can deal with this. She's
Yeah.
fine. And then I would see other children her age, and then I would go down that path again. No, something's not right. She's not right. She's not right. So my mom also had a similar thought. So when Jessica was 6 months old, we made an appointment back in Long Island with a pediatric
Mm-hmm.
neurologist who then tested Jessica and failed every single one of her tests. She did not hit one milestone. And
Oh,
so it was clear that she was delayed in all of her everything. She was delayed in everything. And I remember that day, that day was a really hard day. Obviously, it was a hard day. And, all
yeah.
the thoughts are going through your head of, oh my God, now what? And what's her life going to be like? How are we going to do this? And I didn't know anything. And I was going down that hole of, I remember walking out that night and, putting a blanket around her and thinking, just looking at her and seeing, like, looking at her through, like, the disability. And for that moment,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that day was the last day. After that, I went into fix-it mode. Totally went into fix-it
Yeah.
mode. But that day, the shock, and it shouldn't have been a shock. Part of me was relieved because I knew something was wrong. So I know when families receive a diagnosis, it's okay to feel a little bit of relief because I knew something was wrong and now I was being validated, as you just said. So I did go back to Western New York, to Buffalo, and the doctor there then said, we went to a specialist, and he said, yes, she actually looks like he had two children with a chromosome abnormality and he said, she looks like my children. And so we had genetic testing done. And without going through all that at this point, they did come up with a diagnosis at that time. It was called cri du chat, which is cry of the cat. Jessica never had the cry of the cat. She didn't really look like them,
Yeah.
but they said that she had a deletion in her fifth chromosome. And so we thought she had that diagnosis for several years. And we went to national meetings, and we eventually realized that she didn't have that diagnosis. So
Yeah. You spent 5 years thinking that she
we
had
spent 5 years
something.
thinking that she had that diagnosis. And in that time, my husband and I were tested for cri du chat, and obviously we didn't have any indicators. And so we felt free to have more children because we thought,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this won't happen again. And so we were very fortunate that her genetic disability that she did have did not show up when we had our other children. But at that time, the deletion that she does have wasn't even able to be identified.
It wasn't something that was on the
No, and
radar.
that's a whole other story when she was older.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you got a diagnosis, which again, I love how you described that because I'm learning through this whole process that there's this duality in life. Nothing is ever this or that. It's always this and that. So you had this you gave yourself that time to sort of like grieve and be confused, and then you were like, nope, I've got answers now. So now I can do something.
I feel like I didn't give myself the time to grieve. One of the things that I write in the book, and here's my book, Raising Jess. One of the things I write in my
Yes.
book is I never cried. I never cried.
Hmm.
Everyone around me cried. And I feel that I'm still not sure why I didn't cry. I really went into fix it mode,
Mm-hmm.
but it never happened later on. I mean, and even now, she's 41 years old, and I'm still, you know, so much part of her, learning new things and gaining new skills. So not grieving at that moment didn't hit me later. It continued like that, but I always thought that was a little bit unusual.
I mean, Yeah, but that could just that's just your journey. That's
Yes.
just the path that you took, and you went into, like you said, fix it mode, mama bear mode. You're like, "All right, let's do this. We're gonna do this." Um, Within that 5-year time frame, is that when you had your other children, or did you wait
We did
longer?
not. I had 3 children in 5 years. So, yeah.
Wow.
So it was like having triplets. So I always say I had one who couldn't walk, one who refused to walk, and one who wouldn't stop walking. And it was the baby who wouldn't stop walking. So I had this big double stroller, and Jessica would sit in the front, and my middle child would sit in the back because he still hates walking. He still hates walking. and uh, and my little infant would follow us in a baby walker. It was just we looked ridiculous. Or I would put them both in the stroller, and then I would have the baby on my back, and we'd go to the mall, and we were always a sight to see. We were
Yeah.
we were always yes, we were definitely a sight. But it did feel like triplets, and I think when people saw us, they didn't really know what to make of us because they
Mhm.
weren't triplets, but they all looked
No.
like Jessica just looked more like a baby, and so we were an unusual threesome. I had 3 in diapers at the same time. I one point I was feeding 3 children at the same time. So a lot of the experience could have mimicked a little bit like a triplet experience. But yes, one of the I know it was sometimes when I worked with a lot of families, as I said, many people after they have a child with a disability do not have other children, and I completely understand that. And
Yeah.
we were I feel blessed that we were kind of naive and thought it's not happening again, and it didn't.
Yeah.
But I feel that it was a risk because Jessica was full time care. She's still full time care, and having other children was added a lot to the load.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, how did that sort of impact you? Like, were you doing this all on your own? Was it just you and the 3
Yeah,
kiddos?
because my husband was working. It was me and the 3 children. At the time when Jessica was 5, she did started going to a day program where she was getting her special services. So it wasn't as organized as it is now with
Yeah.
with all the regulations and state regulations and federal regulations. But she did have a program that she went to, and so I was able to have the other 2 home while Jessica went to program during the day. But one of the philosophies we started at the beginning was we're going to do everything. It's going to take longer and it may be more complicated, but we are going to do everything. And we did. I mean, our daughter was in travel soccer, and so I would go to travel soccer with her, and I would do the sleepovers, and Mitch would stay home with Jessica, and then he was the coach
Mhm.
of Alex in baseball. And I would bring Jessica. Like, everybody knew Jessica. We brought Jessica was just a real part of our community. And I know I'm going on a tangent, but I want to say something about that.
Not at all. Yeah.
I have a friend who her son is the same age as my son, Alex, and they lived in Buffalo for a while, and then they moved to California. And one of his first friends was a young man, a young boy in a wheelchair, and they became pretty much best friends. And when my friend said to her son, you know, how did you two become friends? And he said, well, I always knew Jessica, and I always knew how cool Jessica was. So I wasn't afraid of being friends with my friend
Mhm.
Chris. I wanted that because I already had experience with Jessica. So she's really made an impact. And because we brought her into the community over and over and over again, people knew her, and
Yeah.
people were not afraid. I mean, at first, sometimes people gave looks, but she became a familiar community member.
I remember when I was reading about you, that literally the line that you said about like, we're going to do everything and it might just take longer. I was like, yes, this is a person I need to connect with. And like, that is the attitude. Because it's hard to have that attitude. And I can't speak from experience in terms of, I don't have a child with a disability. But similarly to you, with working with a lot of families with kids with low incidence disabilities, it can be really hard. Your vision of what your role as a parent changes, your vision of what your child can accomplish changes, and you can feel really isolated. And it sounds like you and your husband made the decision, like, we're not isolating ourselves. Like, Jessica is part of our family and our family's going to do what we were going to do anyway.
And I don't want to make it feel like it wasn't hard. So you spoke about friendship at the beginning of our interview, and I don't know if this is karma, a blessing. I have no idea. So I was in a store when Jessica was really like 6 months old. And it was before I went to New York to get her evaluated. And I was still struggling with what's going on, my postpartum confusion. And
Yeah.
and I went with my late mother-in-law to a fancy store in Buffalo. And I met this woman who had a baby in her pouch, and we started talking. And we talked for about a half hour. And then I walked away, and my mother-in-law said, "Did you get her number?" I was like, "I'm not picking up like a girl in a store. What do you mean, did I get her number? That's so weird." And my mother-in-law, she was so amazing. She never forced me to do anything. She was always just like, she was my buddy. She's like, "You go back there and you get her number." And I did. And the next day I called, this is my friend Barbara. I called, and we, quote unquote, played every day. And she became like my first true friend there. Unbeknownst to me, she had so much experience in social work and counseling. And when
Oh, wow.
Jessica was eventually diagnosed, she was such a big support. So much so that when we needed to pick legal guardians and our other kids were too young, she was always like, "If anything happens to you, we'll watch Jessica." And they moved after Jessica was 5 years old, and we call each other sisters. We maintained the friendship, and there's two other local people that have also taken on that kind of role with Jessica and with me. But
That's so serendipitous.
it really is. But I do want to say that I did develop panic attacks, and I had a lot of anxiety. And I remember being at Wegmans is our store here, which is, have
Yes.
you heard of Wegmans? It's
I have heard of
pretty
Wegmans.
amazing. Remember standing online thinking I was going to faint, having trouble breathing, and maybe this is part of, as I said, I never grieved. Maybe it just came about physically, but I did develop panic attacks and a lot of anxiety, and always was worried that I was going to develop some illness, and then I wasn't going to be able to care for my child, and and at that point, my children, and who was going to be able to do it in the way that I perceived I was doing it. And I know this is all my own perception. And it terrified me because of her level of need. I mean, she had seizure conditions. She really had a lot of complex medical conditions and severe intellectual disability. And I was terrified, just terrified.
And these
So,
panic attacks they'd just come on? Or would you be able to anticipate them at all? I mean, typically you can't, but
no, but once I had all the tests, like the heart tests and all those tests,
yeah.
and I realized it was panic and not
Yeah.
like physical.
Not like
I
a
was
heart attack.
able, right. I'm not having a heart attack. I'm actually not going to faint in Wegmans and leave
Yeah.
the 3 children laying on the floor with me. I'm going to be able to finish and buy milk and eggs without dying.
Yes.
And once I got past that and realizing that, it helped. It helped because I was able to say to myself, okay, I know what this is. I can deal with this. Not to say that the anxiety, I mean, I still have anxiety. I don't get panic attacks anymore. I really don't. I mean, I've had an occasional one, but no, but I definitely have anxiety, but I don't know if that comes from Jessica or that's genetics because there's a lot of anxiety in our family.
Yeah.
So
So
I
you may
come
have
by,
been predispositioned.
definitely, I come by that naturally, but it definitely having a child who has so many needs triggered that in a way that was, that was, that was hard. It was hard. But again, it didn't stop us. It didn't stop us. I mean, I just one of the things, one of the main points in my book, and I'm just going to say the name, Raising Jess: A Story of Hope.
Go for it. Say it as many times as
Available
you want.
on
You
Amazon, Barnes and
Yes.
Noble, everywhere, and it's award winning. Won 3
Yes.
awards.
And we will link it in the show notes so that our listeners can find it. I want them to check it out.
And they can also buy it on my website, and I will sign it for them at VickieRubin.com. But one of the main tenets that I, want to share with families is that life is not always what you expected. And there's lots of twists and turns. But just because things are different, that does not mean things are bad. It's just you're doing a different path than you thought. It's not that you're doing a bad path. So I never thought having a child with a disability was our life is ruined. Now what are we going to do? It wasn't like that. In fact, she transformed me in ways when you asked who was I before and who I became. I went from that person who's like, oh, I have no patience for special ed to like that became my career and my life. And she taught me and still teaches me so much about patience and love and joy and acceptance and advocacy and helping others, which is what I went on to do in Western New York, helping other families advocate in 6 counties in Western New York. So she transformed me, and I think she transformed our family.
Yeah.
We a lot of people worry about the siblings, and in the book I do talk a lot about the sibling experience. And a lot of people worry, including my in-laws and my parents at one point, were worried, how will this affect Jessica's siblings? Is Jessica just going to get so much more attention that they're going to feel that? And I've read a lot about other siblings where one sibling, she had a sister who had pretty significant intellectual disability. And this sibling, if she didn't get A's in her school, she was worried she was going to catch her sister's disability. And there's lots of stories about how siblings, deal with that information. So as parents, we always talked about Jessica, and we the Jessica's siblings, they always helped.
Yeah.
They helped with Jessica's, and the grandchildren at this point do that too. Or like my granddaughter at 3 years old always wants to help me with Jessica. Can I help her eat? Can I help feed her? All right, so I think one day she's going to be something in the helping field because she is just showing so much of that with Jessica.
Well, because Jessica's just a part of your family, just like every other member of your family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Auntie Jess.
Yeah.
Auntie
Yeah,
Jess,
of course.
and the grandchildren go to her house and they do celebrations and and she's at every family celebration because we are all one family, and we might be a different family, but we are a strong family. And
Yeah.
I think having Jessica created skills for all of us that we never would have had.
And it sounds like, well, it doesn't sound like it did. Like you said, it transformed who you were. It transformed your career. It transformed how you view yourself, not just as a parent, but as a person. Um, and I think too, like you said, it's interesting to read about and to hear about siblings' experiences. That was going to be one of my questions. But I think especially when the sibling is the oldest, those younger siblings have never known any different.
Exactly. That's
Right.
exactly. And I think that's really important because not that anyone can plan this, but
Right, no.
that but they were born into a world where Jessica needed total assistance with everything every single day. And
Yeah,
so they were able that's the life they knew. And as I said, my daughter became a doctorate of physical therapy. So she took that experience and wanted to learn more about the medical field and help others who had motor
like motor
challenges.
function challenges.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
And and so yes, it made a difference, and I think you're right. Them coming into a family that already was doing it is very different than when you have two children who are used to getting like all the attention, and then all of a sudden you have a child who's got medical needs, who's going to the hospital because there's a seizure, who's
right.
who's getting special services. That's tough.
Yeah, well, then because then you have an established routine and an established sort of, just you've established your roles, and then it all shifts and change, which it does with any new addition to a family. But when you're talking about a kiddo with some pretty significant disabilities, like that's a huge shift for everybody.
I think it also helped me having more children put things in perspective. When Jessica was young and before I had my other children, I we did something called patterning,
Hmm.
which it's no one does this anymore, but it was it was basically I'm giving you the real high level. What is this? It was moving Jessica's arms and legs and doing things with her head to try to create new pathways to her brain because in the womb, perhaps the pathways were severed or weren't done right.
Mhm.
And it was a theory. It was unconventional. The Jessica's physicians were, well, it's not going to hurt her. So we did a modified version, which was 4 hours, 6 days a week at our house every day. And I had 40 volunteers who who came to the house and loved up Jessica. And when we were talking before about support, whether patterning worked or not for Jessica, having those people come to my house every day, focusing on our baby, trying to get her to a new level was really enriching also for me and for her. She's still very, very social. So although
Yeah.
she never walked and didn't do a lot of the predictions that they had, she did she always was very social, and maybe because we had all these people in her face every day.
Yeah.
But the reason that I brought it up is that until we had more kids, I was really so focused on fixing Jessica. And once I had other kids, I was able to put all that in perspective a little more because, I mean, having time, there's just only so much time you have it. And,
Yeah.
and I think it was the right thing for our family, for Jessica, and also for her siblings.
Things that are sticking out to me, that are so important are community. And something that we focus a lot on in Quiet Connection is that village, and how so many of us today, and I can't speak a lot to, I say the past, the 80s, the I was born in the 80s,
I know.
but yeah, like I know, but like
I could be your mother.
I but community seems to be the thing that we're all craving, and especially post-pandemic, but the impact that it can make not only on your child's life, but on you as the new parent is just beyond measure. So you created this community for Jessica, and at the same time you were creating a community for your family as well. So you
Absolutely.
had that network that was really there supporting you. And we've talked a lot about, like, in terms of postpartum mental health disorders, like if we had those communities and if we had that kind of support, would the impact be as deep in terms of, would we be as depressed or anxious, or would we be able to cope with them a little bit better? And by absolutely no means diminishing the challenges that you went through with Jessica, also recognizing that that community was really like a foundation for your family, and for you and for her. I
And
feel like I'm repeating myself a little,
no,
but
and we have a different community. There were several people now. So Jessica, I mean, she's 41. She
yep.
lives in a group home 2 miles from our home. And we have two friends. So if my husband and I go out of town, I don't even say anything to them. They go and they're at Jessica's house and they're visiting. And when I come to the house, many times the other women who live in the house will say, "Well, where's Cheryl? Who's my friend? Why isn't she here?" And I'm like, "Hello, I'm Jessica's mother." But we, you know, I have two friends, Cheryl and Ellen, who are that community for Jessica, and go and visit the house, and don't tell me when they're visiting, because they're that community, and I find that so important. And one of
Yeah.
the other things, when we did eventually get Jessica's accurate
Yeah,
diagnosis.
I was going to ask. I was going to ask about that.
Oh my God, that's going to be the ending of the book, but it doesn't matter, and I'm going to
Oh,
tell it. No, it's fine.
spoilers, spoilers.
Spoiler alert! But really, no one reads the book for the spoiler alert. They read it for the
For the
heartwarming,
experience. Yeah.
inspirational story, and the grandparent perspective, the sibling perspective, and the humor. There's a lot of humor in it.
Oh,
This is not a textbook, and this is not anything that is a flat or straight read. I tried to really infuse humor everywhere.
I can't wait
So,
to read it. Oh my gosh.
thank
Okay,
you.
so
All
she
right, so
finally got her
she finally
diagnosis.
got her diagnosis, and it turns out her geneticist lived in our neighborhood, and she came up to me one day and said, "There's a brand new test." She goes, "I really want to try it on Jessica. It's just a blood test." It's the acronym is FISH, I should know this. I'm not going to do the acronym right, and the words
It's
are
okay.
whoa, but it's pronounced fish.
Okay.
And they were able to look at submicroscopic deletions.
Wow.
And there were only 10 done in Buffalo at that time. And Jessica was the first person in Buffalo to actually get a positive diagnosis from that test. And that's
Wow.
where we found out that she had every chromosome has a short arm and a long arm. Short
Mhm.
arm is called Q. I'm sorry, long arm is called Q, short arm is called P. She had a terminal deletion, which is at the tip of the chromosome of the long arm of the first chromosome. And
Okay.
so we were calling it Jessica syndrome, and we still call her syndrome Jessica syndrome. It's extremely rare. So I went on Facebook and I looked this up, and I found a group.
You
And
found a new community.
it's a new community. We call ourselves 1Q4.
Okay.
because it's for people who have on the first chromosome. I don't want to get too much. The chromosome stuff is boring, but people who have a similar diagnosis. So when I joined this group, I was definitely the oldest, and Jessica's the oldest. Most of them are young families, and I attribute this to, and I'm sticking with this, is that first of all, she was diagnosed when she was 21. So most people are not still looking for a diagnosis. They don't have a neighbor
Right.
who's a geneticist who says, "Hey, let's check this out." And then if they get a diagnosis, they're not running to Facebook at my age looking for a support group.
Yeah.
So, but that community has been pretty incredible. The families have gone through ups and downs, and during COVID, we were doing Zooms. We have people from Dubai, we have people from Australia,
Wow.
all over the world, Brazil, and everyone's speaking English. And I've received so many questions. I'm just going to give one thing about the book, about
Do
this.
it.
There was a grandfather who's on the group, and this is when we were doing Zoom, and he was leading the Zoom. And he told me after he read the book, and his daughter read the book. Is his grandchild who had a similar diagnosis to Jessica. And he said after he read the book, his daughter and he were able to have conversations that they never had before because they were both reading the book. They saw that our journey, and he was able to honestly say, "How is this for you? How are you
Yeah.
feeling about this?" And they had some really deep conversations. So
Because they
I would
realized they weren't alone.
they weren't alone, and they were all having the same kind of feelings and the same kind of experiences, but it's hard to ask that question. But if you're reading about it, and you know your daughter's reading about it, then I think it's easier to bring that up.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying this a little bit with a caveat, not about the grandfather, but about the Facebook group, because I'm well aware that there's many groups that are negative, whining, complaining, and not healthy, mentally healthy for people. So
Yeah.
they really have to be able to, if they join a group and it's not a good fit for them, to leave, even if
Mhm.
there are a lot of similarities. If it's not a supportive group and you're not sharing all the blessings, the highs and the lows, then it's not the right group for you.
Yeah.
Or at least for me personally. I've been in other groups, and it's
Just not a good
not,
fit.
I feel it's not healthy to go into a group where people are going to bring you down. You want to be in a group where
Absolutely.
you're going to support each other. You're going to acknowledge that you all have similar challenges and struggles and a lot of medical issues that have been going on in the group. And we've even done, even though we're international, we've given gifts to each other for children who have had struggles, or and some children have passed away, and the group together has sent donations, and it's
Yeah.
really it's a remarkable group. So with looking you can find that, but equally you could
Yes.
also come across a group that's going to bring you down. You don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
And it's the same for anything really. And that it reminded me when I was in the thick of my postpartum mental health struggles, I was looking for support groups, and so many of them, especially the postpartum anxiety groups, everyone on the group is like freaking out. Everyone's freaking out. Nobody's offering any sort of solutions. Everyone's just like, I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this. And I'm like, okay, I don't need more to worry about. So you're absolutely right. You have to find a community that is going to be able to, you can relate to them, but you can support each other too, and sort of help guide through the hard times and celebrate the good things and the glimmers.
That's
So,
why I think your podcast is so important. It's really
oh,
important for
thank you.
families because I don't think, I've look around. I don't think there's a whole lot of podcasts that really talk about as you do, mental health after having children and postpartum depression and getting through it and surviving and being positive and just having the guests that you have had that have had their struggles and then have either overcome it or have learned
Mm.
from their experience. And I think it's a really, really important service that you're providing
I
for
appreciate
families
that.
and
And that's
parents.
the thing. Like, I will never spin this as like, and if you've heard any of my episodes,
I have.
I don't like the term silver linings
Hmm.
because I don't think that like, oh, you were meant to go through this struggle because blah, blah, blah. I don't buy into that. And I don't sit here laughing and smiling because like oh it's fine, it's great. It's I still struggle every day. I have to use my coping skills all day every day. You are still supporting Jessica. Jessica is still like she's meeting challenges, but there is joy to be found among it, in spite of it, and you will get through it. No matter what it is, there I don't even know how to word this. I don't like to like infuse my story into other people's stories because that's not what this is about. But I think the one thing that I took away from my struggle, and I was suicidal because of how extreme my conditions were. The one thing I took away is stay. Stay because it's going to get better. It's not right now. It's not going to be better right now, but it is going to get better. Nothing is permanent.
Absolutely. And I had with my anxiety a similar mantra. I would sit there and sit down and go, "This will pass. This will pass," because it's passed
Yes.
before. So I know I'm going through the now right at the beginning when you don't know it's going to pass. You can't really say that to yourself.
Mm-mm.
But once you've gone through it and it's passed and it will come back, but if you keep telling yourself, this will pass, I can do
Yes.
this. And I think that's another piece that could really help get through it because you have the experience of it passing and of
Mm-hmm.
feeling better. And even with the panic attack, which feels more physical,
Yeah.
I know, just sitting there, okay, I know this will pass. I know. Oddly enough, for me, getting in the car and driving was a good thing.
Yeah.
I maybe because I had a focus, like
And a control. It was the same for
I
me.
never had a panic attack driving. Now I'll probably like get in the road and like, I can't breathe. But no, I never had a panic attack driving. And it was always kind of a strategy for me. Just get in the car. After Wegmans shopping, I got in the car and it went away.
Well,
So,
I think really that's what drew me to you. One, I mean, obviously I have a passion for families who have children with low incidence disabilities. It's just
yes,
kind of a big thing in my heart. But your positivity, and it's not toxic positivity, because again, I am not a fan of that, but it is just like, yes, things are hard and things can be hard and nothing is going to go the way that you think it's going to go, but that does not mean that there is not worth to your life, to your family, to just the experiences that you're going to have. There was always a reason to keep going. So that's kind of what drew me to you.
thank you. And that message that you said is so important. And you hear a lot about you read those little essays that say, "Oh, you were meant to be. You were so good that they chose you as a parent." And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
"What universe says I'm going to give a child really
Really,
the
really big
significant
challenges.
challenges, and then because maybe you're an okay person, I'm going to do that to you." Like that that never made me feel good. Like you're
No.
chosen. No, I mean what makes me feel good is yes, I've embraced our different path, and it has been and I'm not going to want it still is a really amazing journey, and I'm feel blessed about that, but it's not something someone chooses.
No.
or it just says, yeah, choose me. Choose
Right?
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll sign up for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who wants, I mean, I don't know. Maybe
I'll
there's
take
someone out there. Yeah. Write me down.
Put
Oh
me
my
down. Sign
gosh.
me up.
No.
That's
Well, yeah. I feel like this is the perfect time to sort of wind it up. And I go back and forth between two questions that I ask, but I think the question that I will ask you is, if you could go back in time before you had any of your kiddos, and you can't tell yourself what to expect, you can't tell yourself that Jessica's going to come into your life, you can't tell yourself any of those things, but you can instill something within yourself to sort of like arm you, prepare you, what would you instill within yourself?
That is a very good question. I need a minute.
That's okay.
I think, and I hope I'm answering it right, that I would
There's
tell
no right or
myself,
wrong.
okay,
Yeah.
I think I'd want to know about myself that I had a greater capacity to deal with shit. There's
Yeah.
my explicit word.
The one for the episode.
Whoa. than I ever imagined, and that I had strength that I didn't know existed, because I wasn't raised to go out and have a career and do all that, and to know that yes, you will have a career, yes, you can do this, yes, you have a greater capacity than you think, is something that I would hope. And the other thing is just knowing the breadth or the amount of love that raising children, that you have for your children. I mean, you can't know that until you've had a child, and you also
Yeah.
can't know about all the all the things that are so hard, and the anxiety and all the struggles, but that you will get past it, and you will get through it, and you'll get out on the other end. And it's it's important to believe that. And so I wish I would have known a lot of that. I wish I would have known when I was younger that I'd be sitting here talking to you, having written a book, having adult children, being a nana, and a wife, and that I took this challenge and made it into something positive, and I didn't go down that hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I think you answered it beautifully. And I always kind of like to pick out like a word, but like for you, I think it's just like resilience. Like you have the capacity to be resilient.
One thing, and I appreciate you saying that, one thing I write when I sign my book is, may you always choose hope. And I think we all have the capacity to choose hope, to choose, okay, I am going to choose hope, and I'm going to choose things going in a better direction. And that doesn't mean it happens immediately, but looking in the long range.
And you know what? I'm going to add on to that, because when you can't see it, find someone who can hold on to it for you. And I'll be that person to hold on to it for you. I bet, Vickie, for a lot of people in your life, you've been that person in the past, but if you can't hold on to that hope, find someone who can hold it for you until you can take it back, because you have to have it. This has been lovely. I am so glad that we connected. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you for this has been terrific. I know I said it before. This is such an important service that you provide, and thank you for including me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vickie, for sharing your story with me. Hearing you talk about your journey with Jess with such a deep sense of hope and ability to find the glimmers was truly a joy. Listeners, please check out Vickie's book, Raising Jess, A Story of Hope, and follow her Facebook account to keep up with future projects. You can keep up with us on Quiet Connection by following us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads at Quiet Connection or at Quiet Connection Podcast. You can help our community grow by leaving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and consider sharing our episodes on social media. To share your personal journey, you can contact us through our website at Quiet Connection Podcast or by email at quietconnectionppmh@gmail.com. Join us next time when another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you.